Canada. And as I've been alternating land acknowledgements in English and French, this month it is in French. So I will start. Nous reconnaissons que nous sommes accueillis sur les terres des Mississauga, des Haudenosaunee, de la Confédération des Haudenosaunee et du Wendat. Nous voulons également reconnaître la pérennité de la présence des Premières Nations, des Métis et des Inuits. Merci. And now please join me for the playing of O Canada. You may now be seated. Thank you. Okay, so we are at item number 6 on our agenda, which is approval of the agenda. Can I have a mover and a seconder to approve tonight's agenda? Thank you, Trustee Pei. Thank you, Trustee Hassan. All those in favor, we'll do this by a show of hands or say aye. Okay, any against? I'm not hearing any, so that has carried. At this time, we will move on to celebrating board activities, and I believe we will be hearing from Trustees Triskandaraja and Pei, who will start celebrations off this month tonight by speaking to Hindu Heritage Month at the TDSB. Over to you, Trustee Triskandaraja.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to Hindu Heritage Month Committee. I would like to start by speaking on an important figure in Hinduism this year. His name is Swami Vivekananda, and he played a pioneering role in introducing Hinduism to North America through his pivotal speech at the 1893 World's Parliament of Religions, where he championed religious tolerance and an end to fanaticism. Swami Vivekananda is also credited for being the person that introduced yoga to the West. So you can all thank him for that. And he's considered a key figure in Hinduism being recognized as a world religion. So his famous speech made on September 11th, 1893 at the world's first World Parliament of Religions. And this was seen as a sort of a turning point in the way that Hinduism was sort of introduced in the Western world. And even 100 years later, I think his speech is very much relevant today, so I thought I would share it. So bear in mind, this is 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. Sisters and brothers of America, it fills my heart with joy unspeakable to rise in response to the warmth and cordial welcome which you have given us. I thank you in the name of the most ancient order of monks in the world. I thank you in the name of the mother of religions. And I thank you in the name of millions and millions of Hindu people of all classes and sects. My thanks also to some of the speakers on this platform who, referring to the delegates from the Orient, have told you that these men from far-off nations may well claim the honor of bearing to different lands the idea of toleration. I am proud to belong to a religion which has taught the world both tolerance and universal acceptance. We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true. I am proud to belong to a nation which has sheltered the persecuted and refugees of all religions and all nations of the earth. I am proud to tell you that we have gathered in our bosom the purest remnant of the Israelites who had come to southern India and took refuge with us in the very year in which their holy temple was shattered to pieces by Roman tyranny. I'm proud to belong to the religion which has sheltered and is still fostering the remnant of the grand Zoroastrian nation. And I will quote to you, brethren, a few lines from a hymn which I remember to have repeated from my earliest boyhood, which is every day repeated by millions of human beings. And I quote, "As the different streams having their sources in different paths, which men take through different tendencies, various though they appear, crooked or straight, all lead to thee." The present convention, which is one of the most august assemblies ever held, is in itself a vindication, a declaration to the world of the wonderful doctrine preached in the Gita. "Whosoever comes to me through whatsoever form I reach, all men are struggling through paths which in the end lead to me." Sectarianism, bigotry, and its horrible descendant, fanaticism, have long possessed this beautiful earth. They have filled the earth with violence, drenched it often and often with human blood, destroyed civilization, and sent whole nations to despair. Had it not been for the horrible demons, human society would be far more advanced than it is now. But their time has come, and I fervently hope that the bell that tolled this morning in honor of this convention may be the death knell of all fanaticism, of all persecutions with the sword or with the pen, and of all uncharitable feelings between persons wending their way to the same goal. So just wanted to thank everybody for allowing me to share this speech that has been so instrumental in sharing the essence of Hinduism to the West. And I think 100 years plus, it very much is still relevant to us. So thank you. So moving on to the wonderful work that our committee has done, we're proud to recognize Hindu Heritage Month at the Toronto District School Board, which is marked throughout the month of November. And this recognition follows the motion passed by the Board of Trustees since April 2018. Hindu Dharma is one of the oldest living religions, which has flourished for over thousands of years. It's an occasion to recognize and celebrate the rich tapestry of traditions, teachings, and values that are integral to Hindu Dharma and practiced by billions around the world today. November is an opportunity to celebrate the Hindu way of life, examine its impact and contributions to world culture, and recognize values which promote compassion, peace, and inclusion. Sorry, I think that was the first slide. Okay. Thank you. The theme for Hindu Heritage Month is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. Sorry, it's a Sanskrit word and I don't know Sanskrit. But in Hindu Dharma, that means the world is one family. It's based on the spiritual idea that every human being is born with a divine spark and is part of our divine universal consciousness. This ancient message of oneness aims to promote friendliness, acceptance, compassion, and a sense to belongingness towards all others, despite differences of cultures, languages, or thought. The word Vasudhaiva means earth, and therefore this message of care and compassion is also meant for all living creatures and the non-living environment. Okay. An in-person celebration was held on Thursday, October 26th at Beaumont Heights Junior Middle School to kick off Hindu Heritage Month at the TDSB. So let's take this next moment to watch a brief video that highlights the festivities. And the full video of the launch will be posted during November to the TDSB website.
In a time when recent events around the world have highlighted the need for unity and understanding, this year's theme for Hindu Heritage Month, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, "The world is one family" takes on a special significance. It reminds us that in our city and in the TDSB, diversity is our strength, and that our unique backgrounds, cultures, and heritages should not divide us, but serve as a bridge to foster understanding and appreciation of one another. Remember, the world is one family, and when members of a family face adversity, it is our duty to lend a helping hand. Let us make this Hindu Heritage Month a testament to our commitment to celebrating and supporting one another. Thank you for joining us in celebrating Hindu Heritage Month at the TDSB.
We can all achieve peace and unity if we learn to let go. Fill up our lives with humanity. We've gotta let it show. Once you overlook the differences you think we're made up of, you will see that we all are one. We can fall into a place of love I know we have inside. Let your soul shine like the sun. Coming home to where we belong. Coming home to the love in our hearts. Coming home to a place where we are standing together because we all are one. Coming home to where we belong. Coming home to the love in our hearts. Coming home to a place where we are standing together because we all are one.
We would all like to wish you a wonderful Hindu Heritage Month.
Thank you. It's lovely. Are we moving to our next slide? A poster challenge was also held, inviting all TDSB students to enter an image to capture this year's theme. And we're pleased to share with you the 3 winning students from each category. So the first winner, which is in the kindergarten to grade 3 category, is Sharika from Wilmington Elementary School. And in the grade 4 to 6 category is Samrita, who is a grade 6 student from Iroquois Junior Public School. Grade 7 to 12, and I swear I had nothing to do with this, is Shervin, who is a grade 7 school at one of my schools, Lucy Maud Montgomery Public School. So congratulations to all the winners. And again, before I turn it over to Trustee Pei, thank you again to the committee. I know it's a lot of work, and I am so proud that, my daughter, Adya, which is named after Adi Sakti, goddess Durga, that when she starts school, that she can practice her faith and be proud and have that accepted in her school, which is very different than from when I grew up. So thank you again for your unwavering commitment. This wouldn't be possible without your commitment. Thank you.
The Hindu Heritage Month Planning Committee is currently working on education opportunities to celebrate the Hindu heritage throughout the month of November. As part of the celebrations to mark Hindu Heritage Month during the month of November, all TDSB students from grade 1 to 5 are invited to attend a virtual presentation with author Zania Wadhwani. We're thrilled to welcome back Zania Wadhwani once again to the TDSB. At this occasion, we provide students with an introduction to Diwali. This will provide an opportunity to hear the author read her delightful book, It Was the Night Before Diwali. Registration detail that may be found on our internal TDSB website shortly. The Hindu Heritage Toolkit was created for all elementary educators to use to enrich the learning of our students in the classroom. This is available through the TDSB Professional Library. Additional resources are available from our TDSB Professional Library for all educators to use. Please follow Hindu Heritage Month on the Twitter/X. I have a personal connection with the Hindu Heritage Committee, also with a personal connection with the Hindu community in Toronto. Tianzhu is a historical Chinese name for India. I feel strong connection with Hindus because their roots are from India. Cultural and economic relations between China and India date back to ancient times. From over 2,000 years ago, the Silk Road not only served as a major trade route between India and China, but it also brought Buddhism and the martial arts from India to China. These are rich, most ancient civilizations in the world. We need to teach about them in our schools. The Hindu Heritage Month is an opportunity for us to learn more about this ancient civilization that's gifted zero, algebra, astronomy, botany, urban planning, yoga, and meditation, among others, to the world. Earlier this year, I visited a Hindu civilization exhibit at the Baptist Temple. I was so inspired by the deep knowledge and the human values that they teach. The theme this year, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Word is one family, is much needed in this world today. It is needed in our school. Instead of dividing people, harping on our differences, this theme teaches to look beyond our differences, to see the common humanity we share. Hindu Dharma teaches that each human being is born with a divine spark, and that all of creation, all of nature is part of one divine creation. It is a message of peace, belongings, respect for one another, and the environment that the TDSB can easily embrace. I want to thank the Hindu Heritage Planning Committee for their hard work. The Hindu community in Canada greatly contributes to Canadian society and economy, and it's an opportunity to celebrate this. And their beautiful ancient civilization. I want to recognize some members of the Hindu community who are present here today to honor this announcement. Anug Singhal from Toronto Asian Parents Association, Nicole Wu, also from TAPA, and Sangden Verma, the founding member, TDSB Hindu Heritage Committee, and Danny Kanivali, also from the committee, and also our executive superintendent, Shirley Chan. For all the other committee members, Rina Tandon, Deepak Varma, Rashim Mishra, and Priyanka Shah Sasha, and Deb Sasha. Also, Rajini Sharma, the Executive Director of Canadian Organization of Hindu Heritage Education, and Sajid Air, the independent documentary filmmaker, also online as well. Thank you all for coming and for promoting excellence in education and in Canada. I'm so proud of you. Happy Diwali. The celebration starts on November 12th.
Thank you so much. We are having a Diwali festival. We call it North York Diwali Fest. This is our first attempt of doing some, Indian festival at Last Square. When last year I moved here from India, I saw at the time of Diwali, it was all in dark. And generally, Diwali is the day when you celebrate with your friends and family, and there's whole decoration, lightings, fireworks, everything is there on Diwali. So what I missed that, there was no recognition here. And I was missing my friends and family a lot whom with I can celebrate. So with the help of Lily Cheng, we have organized a North York Diwali Fest this year on 11th of November at Last Square. It is from morning 11 a.m. to night 9 p.m. Please come with your friends and family. And it's not just about India, it's about celebrating all the cultures together. We have different performances, not only Indian, but all the diverse performances. We have all the cuisines from around the world. So please come and celebrate Diwali with us. And if possible, say, in the TDSB school, we are announcing as a Hindu Heritage Month. If we can, tell the schools, the parents and the students that come and experience the Diwali, come and celebrate all of us together, then I would appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, trustees, and thank you for providing us with that information. I'm sure many of us will try to attend. So at this time, we are going to observe memorials. So I would just ask everybody to stand for a moment of silence while we go through memorials. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody. You may be seated. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 9, which is the chair's announcements. So good evening and welcome to the November 2023 boardroom regular board meeting. I want to start by acknowledging that it has been about a year since we were all elected. Congratulations to all of us for making it through this first of a 4-year term. It has been my pleasure and privilege to serve with all of you, and I look forward to continuing our work together in the months and years to come. To begin tonight's meeting, as I have done in the past, I want to provide you all with a brief update on our advocacy work since our last regular meeting. You will notice in your inbox that I have written to Minister Lecce to address our significant concerns regarding the funding shortfall that hinders our ability to build previously agreed to childcare spaces in TDSB sites, and its subsequent impact on equity of access to childcare services in our city, particularly in priority communities such as Scarborough in the Northwest, including Etobicoke and York. While childcare is the joint responsibility of the province and our city, our board remains dedicated in our commitment to promoting a seamless day model for childcare services. As in the past, we remain committed to supporting and co-locating childcare services within our schools. Significant inequities exist in childcare services across various areas of the City of Toronto, with disparities prevalent in underserved communities. The delays we have experienced with the ministry in proceeding with the building of childcare sites in our schools has exacerbated the challenge of building much-needed childcare, and this has also been compounded by out-of-date costing benchmarks. These delays resulted in furthering discrepancies in access to quality childcare services and directly led to inequitable opportunities for children and their families in these areas. The result is that in certain areas of the city, there are literally generations of children who have missed out on all of these opportunities. This conflicts with our shared goal of providing equal opportunities for all children and all families in our city, regardless of their geographic location. This afternoon, trustees will have received this letter in their inboxes, and my hope is that you will share it widely, including with your communities and your MPPs and your councillors, so that they too may understand and advocate. Since last month's meeting, I have also shared a letter with Minister Lecce endorsing and supporting the Toronto Youth Cabinet's calls for increased funding to combat food insecurity, as well as mental health supports for our children and youth in Ontario. Last week, I also wrote to Minister Lecce. He's received a lot of correspondence this month. But last week, I also wrote for the opportunity to share our feedback to the proposed amendments to Ontario Regulation 44498 regarding disposition of surplus real estate property, as well as the introduction of a new regulation regarding schools on shared sites. Upon thorough examination of the draft revisions, both the TDSB and our subsidiary, the Toronto Lands Corporation, have reviewed and assessed the proposed changes and provided feedback and comments on the revision to the ministry through proper regulatory channels, but also from the chair's office directly to the Minister of Education, directly to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and directly to the Minister of Infrastructure. To learn more about these submissions, please check our advocacy section on the front and the bottom of the front page of the TDSB's website. I will keep you apprised of any updates or if I hear back on these matters. In other news, and this is turning to something serious, no, I'm not there yet, sorry. In other news, as you know, one of my goals when I became chair was to improve communication between the city, between City Hall and the TDSB. This has led me to engage in regular meetings with the mayor's office throughout the last year, many of which I have mentioned in these monthly update reports. These meetings have been fruitful in many regards, and I won't go through that list, but the latest outgrowth of these meetings was a commitment by the mayor and myself to create a joint committee between the city and school boards. It is my sincere pleasure to announce that following a City Council meeting on October 12th, the City of Toronto has established a joint City School Boards Advisory Committee. This committee will have 4 councillors and 4 trustees on it. The trustees will be drawn from all 4 publicly funded boards in Toronto, 2 from the TDSB, 1 from the TCDSB, and 1 that will alternate from the French and the French Catholic boards. At our next organizational board meeting on November 15th, our board will be able to nominate 2 trustees to sit on this committee. I'd like to take a moment to outline the role of this committee because I think it's important for all of us to reflect on the promise of it. The committee will focus on enhancing information sharing and coordination between school boards in the city at both operational and governance levels. This initiative is pivotal to identifying shared concerns, proposing effective solutions, and driving joint initiatives that involve engaging with communities and advocating at different government levels. The committee will work towards streamlining administrative processes, coordinating program planning, and improving the efficiency of shared use facilities between the city and school boards. A pivotal goal is to develop a community asset strategy supporting local priorities in the utilization and disposition of school board buildings and lands. This strategy will consider the pressing social infrastructure needs arising from economic disparities, population growth, and the imperative to build complete communities in Toronto. The committee will provide guidance to City Council on creating and maintaining safe school environments that are conducive to learning and development. It will also advise on fostering community leadership and creating youth employment opportunities that specifically cater to the needs of our students. This advisory committee will present its recommendations to City Council through the Executive Committee, adhering to the simplified rules of procedure for advisory bodies and its terms of reference as established by City Council. Finally, I believe the formation of this committee marks a significant milestone in our commitment to a more collaborative, cohesive, and supportive environment for our educational and community development endeavors. I'm excited about the positive impact this collaboration will have on the lives of Toronto's residents, particularly our students and youth, and I look forward to seeing the work that we can accomplish with our municipal partners at the city. Next, I would like to speak to something quite serious, and this is the situation in the Middle East. I want to acknowledge that for many of us, this is a tremendously difficult, challenging, and for many, upsetting topic to speak about and discuss. I want to start by saying that our hearts go out to all in our TDSB community who have been and continue to be affected by the attacks and the ensuing war and the humanitarian crisis that is growing more severe day by day in Gaza and Israel. I want to acknowledge that this has been and continues to be an extremely painful and difficult time for so many within our TDSB community. The loss of all civilian lives, Palestinian and Israeli, is both tragic and heartbreaking. Over the last several weeks, we have heard from many, many families, many parents, and many students, and many staff, and many of you in so many different ways, expressing your emotions, your fears, and your concerns. I want to acknowledge that we see you, we hear you, and we care. Given the direct connections that many of our students and staff have to Israel and Palestine, conversations surrounding this conflict have naturally found their way into our schools. As a school board, as a community of learners and educators, we have a responsibility to those around us and in our care. First and foremost, our students and our staff, but I also think to each other as well, as trustees of this board. I have also been thinking about us collectively as the TDSB family. If we look at our communities, our city, our country, and our world, so many people are focusing on our differences. They appear more and more divided, talking in silos, focusing on our differences rather than on what brings us together. As a school board, I feel it is important we recognize and celebrate our differences, but that we also focus on our commonalities and seek out what can and does bring us together. Right now, I think so many of us share one particular commonality. We are all hurting, we are all grieving. Our communities are hurting, and our communities are grieving. And we recognize the pain and the suffering of all who have loved ones or ties to this region. As a school board, our goal should be to ensure that all students and staff feel heard through respectful interactions, while also taking a firm stance against any form of hate impacting our students within our classrooms and our school communities. All students belong in the TDSB community. All staff belong in the TDSB community. I want to say this loud and clear. Incidents of hate and racism, anti-Semitism, anti-Palestinian racism, and Islamophobia will not be tolerated. I encourage parents, guardians, caregivers, and students to reach out to their school principals for further information about additional mental health supports available through our professional services staff, should these be needed. Terror and war disrupt not only communities as a whole, but also student learning and achievement globally. We are fortunate here in Toronto and Canada to be able to focus on maintaining a safe and supportive school environment where all of our students can thrive, both inside and outside the classroom. As a board, it is important that we remain committed to doing everything within our means to ensure this. Unfortunately, we know that the situation in Gaza and Israel is likely to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. And this will continue to be an extremely difficult time for the TDSB family. In closing, My ask for all of us is to stand united in empathy, recognizing the pain that is being felt throughout our diverse communities, that we do so by interacting with all of those around us with care and with understanding, and by inviting those around us to join in a circle of care that is characterized by empathy and compassion for all. We will now move on with this evening's agenda. Thank you. And thank you for listening to my very lengthy chair report. Okay, so at this time, it is my pleasure to welcome in person, we have all three, this is the first time we have all three of our student trustees in the boardroom together. So I would like to welcome student trustee Kai, student trustee Bell, and student trustee Secord. It is time for their report. And thank you for joining us tonight. It's really exciting to have all three of you together with us.
All right. Thank you, and through the chair, trustees, senior staff, and community members, I apologize for my absence for the past 2 months, but it is wonderful to be back with all of you once again. As this is the first time that all three of us student trustees are here together, I thought it would be a wonderful idea to formally introduce ourselves for the first time and offer some opening remarks before our student trustee report tonight. To start off, my name is Yikai Zhou, and I am a grade 12 student in the Biotech SHISM program at A.Y. Jackson Secondary School. I am also humbled and beyond excited to be serving over 235,000 students as one of your student trustees for the 2023 to 2024 school year. As student trustee, I have two main missions for the year. One, to foster a newfound sense of community in the TDSB, and two, to help elevate individual student stories into the forefront of TDSB's policy development and decision-making. Within my term, I hope to focus specifically on making structural changes that will last long after I leave. One such change is the creation of a board-wide President's Council to liaise schools across the school board with the student trustees, furthering student governance and advocacy in the TDSB. This is one idea among many others. As a lifelong learner, I firmly believe that education is single-handedly the most important predictor of a child's future and the future of the world. As trustees, I hope we can put aside our differences and find common ground in what is most important and who we all serve at the very end of the day, the students. Thank you, and I look forward to working with all of you. I will now pass it to Trustee Bell.
Thank you, Trustee Zhao. So I've had the privilege to join you all in two, I would say, board meetings during my term. But to reintroduce myself, my name's Angelica Bell, and I'm a proud grade 11 student attending William Lyon Mackenzie CI. And I have the privilege of serving as one of your three student trustees. Now, the reason why I became a student trustee in the first place truly stems from my true drive and passion towards educational advocacy and representing both underserved spirit students and students overall within our board. Now, my main objective for this year is to truly bridge the gap between students and our educators, fostering a community of constant mutual learning by attentively listening to our students. I hope to achieve a comprehensive understanding of the wide array of student experiencing within our board. During my term, I aspire to focus on gathering insights into student experiences across the board for a culminating report of students' perspectives based on qualitative and quantitative data collection through the students we represent. The most effective way to achieve this goal is to achieve genuine connections with the students we represent through going into student spaces and truly explaining what student trustee is and how we'll best be able to support them as student learners. Now, I say this often, and you'll hear this without my term, but I truly stem from an affirmation my parents have instilled in me since very, very young, and that is knowledge is power. Now, as a student trustee, I truly understand the fact that us as students are the power within this board, and we're meant to be able to extend that power to each and every one of you to be able to advocate for us on the board level. Now, that's what I truly wish to do as a student trustee, and make sure that our students are represented on every facet possible. Now I'll pass it on to Trustee Secord.
Ani, everyone. My name is Ozawa Makukwe Secord, but I go by Ozawa. I know it's a mouthful. Again, we've established ourselves at previous meetings, but I would like to remind everybody, I go to Rosedale. I'm a grade 12 student, and I'll be serving as your Indigenous Student Trustee to 2023 to 2024. My priorities this year are to advocate and uplift Indigenous excellence within our schools and our youth in all of Canada, with connecting to our other Indigenous trustees and other Indigenous lifelines, other trustees in different provinces and cities in Canada. I hope to also join and visit schools, doing my best to continue that connection with their students that has been lost over the years. We want to make sure that we're moving past just a memory of Indigenous people and youth, aside from our unfortunate and dark history in Canada, but we want to further just the miscommunication of our history and who we are as people, but to push past that, and again, make sure that we are seen and that we are known and that we are doing amazing things. And I hope that I will be able to do my best alongside my other co's. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Board of Trustees. So now on to our student trustee report. Our first set of items are involved with OSTA ACO. The student trustees attended OSTA ACO's fall general meeting from October 19th to 22nd in Toronto for a weekend of professional development, mutual learning, and networking. This year, OSTA ACO introduced 3 organizational pillars for the term: learning, leverage, and legacy. Each student trustee also had the opportunity to join an advocacy interest group to focus on specific areas of improvement within our education system.
Our second point is our advocacy interest groups from OSTA ACO. Trustee Bell joined the Equity and Inclusion AIG, Trustee Zhao joined the Student Wellbeing AAG, and Trustee Secord joined the Truth and Rec AAG. Trustee Zhao also serves as the Golden Horseshoe representative of the Cabinet for the Public Education Interest Group. Each AAG has commenced their initiatives, and we hope to provide updates on each of our group's progress.
Our next agenda item is regarding the TDSB Student Senate. The TDSB Student Senate and student trustees will attend an upcoming leadership retreat this weekend at Mono Cliffs Outdoor Education Center from November 3rd to the 5th. This retreat will focus on team building activities and allow the Senate to plan out their initiatives for the rest of the year.
Now we'll dive into initiatives. So the Student Trustee Social Media Campaign. So student trustees, myself and my co's here, have been working with communication officer Cindy Nguyen to establish goals, a timeline, and an overall action plan to make sure our students are being best engaged with social media platforms. Of course, we're all aware that students are actively on social media platforms such as Instagram and X and other social media platforms overall. So we're trying our best to create an action plan to best advocate for them in that sense. Secondly, liaison with stakeholders. The student trustees have recently met and established connections with community stakeholders. Trustee Secord met with the Indigenous Trustee Council, and Trustee Bell, myself, met with the TDSB Student Equity Collective. And with the Equity Collective, we're currently diving into campaigning for our second set of individuals joining the collective, along with other initiatives within equity within the board. And I also gave a student trustee report at the BSA SAC meeting. So that really dives into Black student experiences and making sure that we're advocating for that on the board level.
All right, and then our next item is student council contacts. So Trustee Zoe, myself, and Executive Superintendent Jack Negro have been collecting the contact information of every secondary school student council in the TDSB. This is with the hopes of establishing a President's Council, as I mentioned earlier, where student trustees can directly connect with every single secondary school in the TDSB and for greater student involvement and board advocacy. We have now received almost all entries, and we hope to continue the momentum.
Yes. Now, diving into new business, so advocacy within the financial literacy curriculum through the mathematical avenue. So I had the privilege of meeting with TDSB superintendents and math leads, Lisa and Denise, regarding the implementation of the financial literacy curriculum throughout mathematical avenues. This is really in terms of creating the tools and communication resources needed to best advocate for financial literacy teaching within the mathematical avenue.
Our next item is the student census. So Trustee Bell met with the Student Census Advisory Committee regarding the equitable and effective use of collected census data. The student trustees will continue to work with the committee on further actions.
Next, diving into school visits. So I'm currently in the process of setting up school visits to gather insights into the student experiences across the board to assist with accumulating reports on student perspectives, which I mentioned within my opening report. I've currently set up visits with Northview Secondary School and CH Best in Learning Center 2. Trustee Zhao and Seacourt hope to follow suit and assist with the reports overall.
Our next item is in funding for Indigenous students. I, Trustee Secord, met with administrators and other educators regarding equitable funding and provision for the opportunities and further support for Indigenous students, especially in the beginning year of the grades. We want this to be an ongoing initiative, and I hope to further my reports. Our next item is media and events. For OPSPA Northern Region Conference, Trustee Secord traveled to Sault Ste. Marie for the OPSPA's Northern Regional Conference from October 13th to the 15th. I connected with the other Indigenous trustees in the province. They were super cool. I missed them already. The trustees of OSPA, we had the opportunity to talk to a lot of them directly. So that was also very cool. And we also got the opportunity to work with a group called Turtle Concepts, who I hope to bring into the Toronto and into our schools. They are an Indigenous-led group with many Indigenous educators and wonderful, wonderful working class individuals who I think could be a real support for Indigenous excellence just in any field.
So diving into our last point in terms of media and events, I had the privilege of being a guest speaker and conference organizer for the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievements Youth Participatory Action Research Conference at York University on October 28th. Now, this conference overall showcased the detailed research done by the center students and focused on decolonizing pedagogy, mental health, financial literacy, mentorship, and preservation of Black and African cultures within the TDSB's resources. Walking through the sessions and being able to truly understand what Black students are feeling and experiencing within our board was essential to the work that I do here within the Toronto District School Board. And it was just an amazing experience being able to see the amazing work that youth can do, no matter their age, grades 9 through 12.
And that basically concludes our student trustee report. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any one of us. Thank you so much.
So at this point, we do have a timed item at 7:45, so I would just ask the director's indulgence. Do you mind if we move your director's report a little bit later in the evening? Okay, thank you. So at this point, we're going to skip to item number 15.1, which is a report from the Office of the Integrity Commissioner. I do believe we have the Integrity Commissioner here with us on Zoom. So at this point, I will turn it over. This is regarding item number 15.1, which is an Integrity Commissioner Code Complaint Investigation Report regarding Trustee Dennis Hastings Code Complaint IC 24080-0523. Mr. Maynard, may I give the microphone over to you, please? And welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. So through you, Chair, thanks to everyone for having me this evening. I've laid before the board a report following an investigation that was conducted. I don't think I need to go into significant details about the investigation itself because everything is laid out in the report, which I'm sure you've all had a chance to read. Suffice to say that following the investigation, I found that there was a breach of the code of conduct, following which my recommendation is that the board also make the same finding. The Education Act doesn't delegate to me the responsibility to actually make the finding of a code breach. My role in this is to conduct an investigation and to provide a report to the board for the board to make that decision. So Section 218.3 sub 2 of the Education Act requires the board to make inquiries where there is a potential breach of the code of conduct, and then following the inquiries being made, which is what I've done on your behalf, determine whether the member has breached the board's code of conduct. And I, of course, as I've said, have recommended that you make such a finding. After a decision is made, if the board does decide that the code was breached, the board then has a limited range of options in terms of sanctions that are set out in the Education Act and also copied in your code of conduct. Those sanctions include a censure, barring a trustee from attending all or part of a meeting of the board or a meeting of a committee, or barring the member from sitting on one or more committees of the board for a period of time specified by the board. I have not in my report recommended any of the statutory sanctions. Certainly they are open to the board to consider, but I have not made that recommendation. I have suggested, and again, it wasn't a recommendation, but I have suggested that the board may wish to consider something in the alternative by way of a remedial approach. Now, the Education Act doesn't discuss remedial actions with respect to code matters, but it is something that appears in the code of conduct. It's important to note a remedial action is not punitive. It's not meant to be a penalty or a sanction. The purpose of remedial action really is to help achieve compliance and to sort of set things right where something has obviously gone wrong. Examples of that could be, for example, an apology. It could be something like training to be attended and provided by the board, because I think probably if you get to the point where you're suggesting that someone attend training out of their own expense, it almost becomes punitive at that point. So I wouldn't ever recommend something like that, but training provided by the board perhaps could be something that could be recommended. The return of property, if in fact it's an issue dealing with conflict of interest, for example. So an apology is something that I've actually suggested in my report, is something that perhaps the board may want to consider. If the board decides that the code was in fact breached, and whether or not the board decides, to pursue some sort of sanction or remedial measure, the board does have some things that it has to do this evening. So once you've made the decision, if in fact you do find that there was a breach, the board then has to issue a notice in writing to the member in question, and provide the member with a period of not less than 14 days to provide a response to that in writing, and then the board can either uphold its decision, revoke its decision, or vary its decision in some capacity. So that's really what's before you today. First step is to decide whether or not there was a breach. Second step is decide what to do about it. And then after that, there are some administrative things that need to happen with respect to written notice, a period for response from the member in question, and then reconvene at a future date and either uphold the decision or vary or revoke it in some fashion. So that is my report, and I turn it over to the board at this point to decide what you'd like to do with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. So at this point, we will be considering whether there was a breach. I'm looking to anybody who wants to speak on this, including trustee to which this code complaint came forward about. If anyone is welcome of the trustees to speak on this. Trustee Pei, sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to be short. I don't think the code of conduct has been breached in this case. I won't know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Pei. Trustee Hassan.
Yeah, I don't want to speak about his actions or his inactions, but I just want to speak about his character. Trustee Hastings from Etobicoke North has spent, several years giving back to community, the nonprofit sector, working with different educational boards, and he's been an amazing mentor for many youth. I know personally in York Southwestern, so I just wanted to share those words. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Hassan. Trustee Dawson. And then Trustee Patel, we've got you on the list. We've got a growing list.
Thank you. And I hope that we can hear from Trustee Hastings as well. So I did have an opportunity to speak with Trustee Hastings about this issue. It is also clear from the Integrity Commissioner's report that he did breach the code. I will be putting forward some suggestions later on how we might address this that I have previously discussed with Trustee Hastings. But I just wanted to share a little bit of an anecdote. My mom's in a wheelchair. So my mom has been permanently in a wheelchair for the last several years. She has multiple sclerosis, and she has a great sense of humor. So she is a very sassy woman. I think that's what's kept her here. But, and in speaking with Trustee Hastings on this, I conveyed probably my mom would have found his comments funny. But she has a next door neighbor at the long-term care home that she lives in who would absolutely not have found that funny. So I think that, while Trustee Hastings did not intend to cause any harm, while he may have people in his life who he interacts with who may find such a joke funny, who have a lived experience of being in a wheelchair, the impact in this situation was that the person did not find it funny. They took offense to it, and it resulted in an Integrity Commissioner report or complaint. So I choose to honor the lived experience of the complainant in this situation. I think that we cannot assess for ourselves if we do not have that lived experience whether something is offensive or not. And I, again, have had an opportunity to discuss this at length with Trustee Hastings and hope that the board will consider a fair consequence that I have put together for consideration after we vote on this, should we deem him to be responsible for breaching the code. Thank you.
Trustee Patel, you're next.
Chair. I think this incident happened in March, if I'm not wrong, and Trustee Hastings probably was on board for 5 months, if I'm not wrong. Am I right? This incident happened in March, right? As far as I know, Trustee Hastings, this is what Trustee Hastings is all about. He has a very clean heart. He does not realize that, this could be an offense to someone. The other thing what I have noticed is when I saw Trustee Hastings, and I feel for him because when I joined the board, I thought trustees have lots of power. Is if like we are an MPs or MPPs, right? That's what I felt. But after 1 year, I realized that no, it's not that. So I think we should give benefit of doubt to Trustee Hastings on this. Whatever he did was completely wrong, and I feel sorry for the victim who is involved in this, right? But he's a very clean-hearted guy. I can vouch for that. He has a very good heart. And please consider that he's a gentleman. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, we have Trustee Lee followed by Trustee Shen. Go ahead, Trustee Lee. Oh, maybe that was from before. We're on the, we're looking on Zoom. Okay, Trustee Shen, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to take this opportunity to ask, if possible, through you, Madam Chair. It's always important to hear from the trustee their perspective on what happened, as these reports may not tell us exactly how they're feeling about this incident. If I was the trustee in an Integrity Commission report, I would want to be given that opportunity. So I don't know if it's something explicitly that we can offer. Having said that, I think, obviously intentions and impact are two different things. The intention may not be ill, but the impact is something we need to always consider. And I'm sure as kind-hearted person who works quite a bit with diverse communities, Trustee Hastings has interacted with many, many people of all different backgrounds in many low-income areas and so on, would understand that, sometimes we might not have the intention, but when we have had an impact on someone, we take responsibilities. And I'm sure as someone who's elected, as someone who has served the community, he will understand the importance of that. But I would like to hear, if possible, from Trustee Hastings, his reaction to this, as well as anything he would like to add to the report before we even go further into determining the next steps.
Okay, Trustee Shan, I think what we'll do is continue the speakers list, but we will come back to your request to Trustee Hastings. So up next, we have Trustee Rajakulasingam. Please go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. I know that I'm still getting to know a lot of the trustees on the board, especially our your colleagues that joined us this term, and one of them is Trustee Hastings. And I'm hearing what Trustee Hassan and Trustee Patel have shared about Trustee Hastings. What I'm reflecting on is when it comes to certain comments about our lived experiences, race, abilities, our income levels, certain comments can be received in different ways. And when it's outside of my lived experience, what I would usually do is think about how individuals receive those comments. And some folks may think of it in one way, and others may receive it in other ways. And I think it's best not to take one person's comment and generalize it as this is what this community would say, but look at it as more an individual basis. And I think I'm getting to know Trustee Hastings, and I'm hearing that his intent might not have been there, but I'm thinking about the individual and how that comment may have been received to that particular individual. I'm also thinking that, every day in this boardroom, we talk about different forms of discrimination. We talk about how it would impact our students. And I think as elected representatives, we represent communities, but we also represent students. And how our behavior in this boardroom, in our schools, I think we also need to be held accountable. So I think those are some of my comments or my thoughts as I'm working through this. And just looking forward to hearing going to think about what colleagues have to say tonight. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I will now, not seeing any other speakers on the list at the moment, so, I'm sorry, Trustee Lee now. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I just want to stand up and say that I've known Trustee Hastings since he became elected, and I know him as a kind and well-hearted person who is doing this really to help students. And I don't know Trustee Hastings as someone who is combative or would come out and insult people or make them feel bad. Now, with that being said, I always tell those around me that our words are received by the recipient only, and how those are being received is has to do with their context, their background, and who they are. So I think it is always important for us to be cognizant of how our language might be interpreted differently and cause different feelings. With that being said, as trustees, we say a lot of stuff. I can't put myself above a certain bar to say that I will never say something that would be taken, in a way that was unintended by an audience of mine. And, I've come to the conclusion that if that actually happens, I would most likely apologize, learn from that experience, and listen to the story of that person and understand why it is being received that way. I feel like every time we make a comment that is taken in the way that is not the way that we had intended, if it comes to the board and we vote to say whether or not that comment broke the bylaw, I feel like there are a lot of comments that could fit into that category. It might just be easier for, to stand up and say, I'm sorry, we learned from this, and we move on trying to help our community, which is, I think, why we're all here. All right, so thank you very much.
Okay, so at this point in time, I guess I would, there's been a request by one of the trustees, Trustee Hastings, for you to consider if you want to address the issue that's been raised.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Hastings. The person you're reading about in these papers is not me. I do not go out intentionally or unintentionally to hurt somebody, because it's quite the opposite. I am a outgoing, gregarious type soul, and I speak to and defend everything that I see. So if my words were taken out of context, then I will have to apologize for said words. Because that, again, the words on these pages are not me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Hastings. Trustee Laskin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Please rule me out of order if this is not appropriate or not, but I'm not sure what Trustee Hastings said. Did he apologize or didn't he apologize? Because I heard him say, if my words were, then I would, which is not what the Integrity Commissioner's report said. So I'd just like to clarify. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Trustee Hastings, would you like to respond?
Yes, I will clarify. I am apologizing, Ms. Laskin. My words were taken out of context, and I'm going to have to apologize to that. And I am apologizing to that very thing.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, Trustee DeVitis, go ahead.
I'm going to suggest, in light of the apology, that I know that there's a possibility of a motion coming forward, but that we work with Trustee Hastings to get this apology to the person that made the complaint, and that may be the way for us to deal with the issue.
I'm sorry, Trustee DeVitis, can you repeat that a little bit louder? I found it hard to hear exactly what you're suggesting.
Sorry about that. So I'm suggesting that instead of dealing with the issue through a motion, is that there may be a motion coming forward, that we deal with it by allowing Trustee Hastings to forward his apology to the person that made the complaint.
I'm just seeking clarification from Ms. Joseph Dowers to see how we might proceed. Just one moment. Mr. Maynard, are you still on the call?
Yes, I am.
Oh, wonderful. I just want to clarify for trustees that the next step for us would be to determine if Mr. Hastings breached the code. In terms of the suggestion that's been made that the apology be sent to the complainant, the board would first have to vote on whether there was a breach And if there's no breach, we don't do anything further, or can we do something further is my question. Could there be a motion made after that, or would you be able to just go over once again what our options are given the suggestion that's been made?
Certainly. So, yes, the first step is the board now has to decide whether or not there was a breach. That is something that is required by the legislation. So that question has to be answered now that this is before the board. So that is the first step. If the board determines that there is no breach, then I don't think the board really has any means of suggesting further action from that, probably. So there would have to be a determination of a breach for the board to then action something arising from the breach. If there is no breach, then there's probably nothing to be done. That doesn't mean that something can't be done privately outside of the board, but I would say that the board would first need to find that there is a breach before there's any sort of motion involving either a sanction or a remedial measure. And as I mentioned before, I did recommend that the board consider something in the remedial measure side of things rather than a sanction. So, but that again, that's entirely up to the board how you proceed. But the first step that you have to do is decide whether or not there was a breach to begin with, and then decide where you go from there.
Okay, thank you. Are trustees clear
Point
on?
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Sure, Trustee Shen, please go ahead.
In the past, I do remember, correct me if I'm wrong, that it doesn't have to be a separate board for determining if a breach happened. There's the Integrity Commissioner's report. Would that be in the form of whether to receive this report, accept the report, or reject the report? Or does it have to be a separate motion around the breach? Because I think that if I remember correctly, there was a situation where just the report was received.
I'm just checking with Ms. Joseph Dowers on what you're referring to. Do you recall which example, Trustee Vice Chair Shan?
I think in this term we had one previously that came on from an integrity commissioner, and the trustee that was involved wasn't actually a trustee anymore. In which situation we received it. Maybe that was a special case. But my question is, do we need a separate motion or separate vote on the contravention, or is it enough to consider the report and accept the report of the integrity commissioner?
So in the case that you mentioned, the board did find that the code of conduct was not breached, and then no further action was taken on that one.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we now, at this point, I think we're required by the Education Act to determine whether Trustee Hastings contravenes Section 6.10A of the Trustee Code of Conduct. And that's on the screen, and we can vote in eScribe. Right, sorry, we need a mover and a seconder. Hassan and Laskin. Thank you, trustees.
Sean in favor.
We're going to pause for one moment. On eScribe, some people were voting on what's on the screen. Do you see it? Okay, everybody's seeing it properly. Okay.
Madam Chair, eScribe is not working.
So how do you vote, Trustee Pei?
I vote against.
Thank you. McLean. Yes, he was.
Trustee Hassan.
Trustee Hassan was. Okay.
Trustee
No.
Hastings. Trustee Tristan.
4.
We're going to close the vote. And that has carried 16-3. So at this point, trustees, we can leave it. We can decide to do something different. The suggestion from the Integrity Commissioner in the report was that it need not be punitive, given the context of all of this. So I would just look to trustees. We can start a speakers list if you wish. Trustee Dawson, you're the first hand raised, then Trustee King is on the list. Trustee McLean's on the list. We'll start. Trustee Dawson, please go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, I had a recommendation that I will ask staff to put on the screen. So I hereby move that Trustee Dennis Hastings tender a public oral apology at our next regular meeting or a written apology to the complainant within 30 days of the board's receipt of the Integrity Commissioner's report. And Part B, that the director arrange for the Human Rights Manager to meet with the respondent to, and can you please scroll up so that those of us in the room can see it? I just can't see the bottom part. Review and provide feedback on the oral or written apology referenced at Part A, and I do think that that is actually crucial to have the Human Rights Department involved in that apology. It is a complex issue, and there is a potential to further cause harm if it's not done appropriately. And also Part 2, that the Human Rights Department and Trustee Hastings review the principles of the equity, thank you, and accessibility and prevention of harassment in the workplace training that was provided to trustees. So that would be a one-on-one with the Human Rights Manager. And this is something that I have discussed with Trustee Hastings already and got his agreement, but welcome his comments at this point as well.
Okay. And can I just confirm, Trustee Earhart, are you the seconder for this motion?
Yes, confirming I'm the seconder, and I'm happy to comment at a later stage, Chair.
Okay. We have a speakers list, so we will add you to it. So up next, we have Trustee McLean. Please go ahead.
I'm not sure I wanted to speak to this per se. I'd like this to play out. I wasn't.
Okay, so would you like to be added to the regular list?
Please.
Okay, so right now we have a motion on the floor from Trustee Dawson and Trustee Earhart. So this is for comment on the motion. I have Trustee King who's up next.
Thank you, through the chair. In considering this recommendation, I would like, if possible, just to get a better understanding around the written apology. This was something that was noted in the report and didn't happen. So I just wanted to understand whether this was an accessible method for Trustee Hastings or if there is just another barrier consideration to being able to provide a written apology to the complainant.
Okay, so is the who are you directing the question to?
If it's appropriate, I'm directing it to Trustee Hastings.
Okay. Trustee Hastings, would you like to respond? Do you wish to respond to Trustee King's question?
Thank you, through the chair. I'm not quite sure what I'm hearing, but if what I'm hearing is you would like to have, or there would like to be an apology, I would like that to be a verbal, an apology to the lady herself.
Okay, Trustee King, please go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. If I can just further clarify the question, I'd like to know if there is a barrier or an opposition to a written apology to the complainant. I'll repeat the question. I just wanted to clarify and understand whether or not there is a barrier or opposition to providing a written apology to the complainant.
Yes, there is. Through the chair, if I've wronged somebody, I would like to tell them to their face that I have wronged them, not to have a piece of paper floating around saying, yes, he wronged me. I'd like to be able to apologize to the person in person. And that is, it's a quirk. Thank you.
Okay, we're working on a speakers list. Trustee Rajagulasingham, please go ahead. And I'm sorry, I think I messed up the order, so it's your turn.
Through the chair, this might be a question for the Integrity Commissioner or Governance, but I'm going to try Integrity Commissioner. From what I understand, the victim had filed a human rights complaint, but since it's to do with trustees, it came to the Integrity Commissioner. So as in a motion, are we able to involve the human rights manager to speak with a trustee? Is that something that we have the capacity to do? That's my question.
Okay, so through the chair, thank you for the question. My view of it is, again, we're in the realm of remedial measures as opposed to sanctions. I would say that's probably something that's perfectly fine to do. You know, when we're, as I understand the motion, and perhaps the mover and seconder could speak to this, but the involvement of the Human Rights Office in this regard is to assist the respondent trustee, Trustee Hastings, in terms of crafting the apology and how to sort of move beyond this. It's not an issue of referring the matter back as a policy violation or as a policy issue under the Human Rights Code or human rights policies of the board. It's really sort of a matter of where do we go from this point forward. So I would say that that's probably just fine, you know, subject to anything anyone in governance may have to say about it.
Thank you. Through the chair, I would just ask that at the time of when we're going to vote on this, if they can be voted ad seriatim separately.
Okay, so you want to ad seriatim?
Yes,
Is that
please.
your question? Yeah. I just wonder if we might be able to ask the Director of Education in terms of the question, just for clarity, the question that Trustee Rajagulasingham raises about whether we are able to have the human rights manager involved. I know it says go through the director in the motion, but just beyond that, I wonder if you might be able to clarify the how staff's view on this, I guess.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I take that the spirit of this motion is that someone with human rights expertise would meet with the trustee in order to fulfill Part I and II. It may not be appropriate for it to be the human rights manager, but we certainly would make sure that a confidential human rights professional could support the trustee in fulfilling this motion if that is the wish of this board.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm in full support of A. I'm still pondering the second point just because I understand if Trustee Hastings would want to do that as a voluntary basis, but I'm reflecting on, as a board, if we can do that. So I'm just going to ponder. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Rajakulisingam. Up next, we have Trustee Earhart.
Thanks very much. And through the chair, I just wanted to speak that I have not connected with Trustee Hastings, and through the chair, but directed to Trustee Hastings, I'm sorry we have not connected. But I understand that Trustee Dawson has connected on this, and so for that reason, I'm comfortable seconding and supporting. All the pieces of this seem to make sense to me in terms of my experience and context with restorative work. The only thing I would note to that, and I don't think it needs to go into the motion, but I did want to say personally that whenever we look at something like this, there's harm. There's many harms. We have here discussed harms to the person, to the complainant, pardon me. There is also harm to the respondent, and I want to acknowledge that and put that out there. And then there's also harms to all of us as a board, but there's harms and there's also with that learnings, and so that's why I feel that the second part is important. It's important that the respondent, and so Trustee Hastings, has opportunities for learning. I also want to say that it's important for all of us as a board to continue our learning. And so to that end, I just want to put forward that for me, a learning is to revisit our Policy 75 Board Member Code of Conduct and to continue my own personal learnings around human rights and school boards in solidarity with Trustee Hastings and all their board members as we continue our collective learning and growth in service to schools. And thank you very much.
Okay, so we have two more speakers on the list on this motion, Trustee McLean, followed by Trustee Patel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. I voted in favor of that there was a breach, and I have always found it very difficult in this chamber to sit in judgment of my colleagues, and have always deferred and always put a great reliance on the expertise of the Integrity Commissioner to determine when violations take place. That being said, it becomes the board's responsibility after we've determined a breach what the appropriate conduct for that is. And this is the fifth such complaint that's happened in the 5 years that I've had the pleasure to serve on the board. And this is further than I'm not suggesting that anything that's being suggested is a bad thing. I'm just not comfortable requiring it for something that the report indicated that there was no intent for. I too have, Trustee Hastings has the ward to the north of mine. I've met with him often, and I believe he's good-natured and wants the best for everyone in his ward and throughout the TDSB, and has acknowledged that a mistake was made. He's issued an apology tonight in public, wishes to do so in person. And from my 2 cents, that'll be good enough for me.
Okay, next we have Trustee Patel. Please go ahead.
I like to understand what is apology. An apology is I'm sorry, or an apology is 10-page letter. What I heard from Trustee Hastings today was an apology. He said sorry very clearly. So I like to understand what is an apology. Number two, just for my clarification, is this motion out of order? Because it says that the respondent, Trustee Dennis Hastings, tender a public oral apology next meeting. I think he did already today. So how many times are we going to humiliate him? Again and again? So I like clarification on that. That apology made by him today is not an apology. On Part B, review and provide feedback on the oral and written apology reference to Part A. What are we looking for here?
Okay, so you raise an interesting question, Trustee Patel, and I guess I'm looking for a clarification from the mover about how this oral apology would be different, or whether that's already been accomplished this evening, and which would make it moot.
I mean, through the chair, it's up for debate, I guess, as to what an apology actually constitutes. What I heard was, I'm not sure that it constitutes an apology according to addressing the human rights infractions. So I would feel more comfortable with the input of a professional into the apology.
Trustee Patel?
Through you, Madam Chair, before we analyze or whatever we want to decide on apology, let's first figure out an apology made by Dennis Hastings today. Is it acceptable?
Okay. Was that a question?
It is a question because it's a debatable question. There was an apology made. When a clarification was asked by Trustee Shelley Laskin, Trustee Hastings clearly said that I'm sorry. Can we debate that, if that apology is accepted or not?
No, I know. So I think the challenge, Trustee Patel, and I understand the conundrum. I think the challenge, just as I reflect on this, is that an apology constitutes different things to different people. People hear different things in the same way that we've talked tonight about how someone might hear a comment. Depends on their lived experience, depends on their perception. So I think so I understand the situation. What I would suggest is that there's been a request to vote ad seriatim on this. So my question, I suppose, to Ms. Joseph Dowers is that in terms of governance, voting on this ad seriatim, does that solve the conundrum? Because an apology to one person is an apology, like what Trustee Dawson has suggested is a more reflective type of apology versus, I'm not sure exactly from a governance perspective. Would you have any suggestions on how we would proceed here?
Madam Chair, the motion still stands, and we could proceed to vote ad seriatim on it.
No, they're not, because we have Trustee Arts is still on the list. Okay, so Trustee Patel, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I still have a problem with this motion. And I think a written apology, I understand, but an oral apology has been already done. So I really like to have a clarification on this. Was the apology given by Trustee Hastings to Trustee Laskin in front of this board, in front of public, was accepted, yes or no?
I would just like to clarify, I don't think the apology was to Trustee Laskin. Trustee Laskin asked for a clarification of what Trustee Hastings meant, or could he explain what he meant? But I don't think it was an apology to Trustee Laskin. I think it was an attempt to explain what his apology was to the complainant, not to Trustee Laskin. I don't think he was apologizing to Trustee Laskin.
Thank you. No, he was clarifying, Madam Chair. When Trustee Laskin asked, he was clarifying that, yes, I am sorry. He was not addressing Trustee Laskin on that. Trustee Laskin asked for clarification.
Correct.
Yes, so he was not saying sorry to Trustee Laskin.
That's what I was saying.
Right?
We're on the same page.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do you have further questions? Okay, we're going to move to Trustee Arts, then Vice Chair Shan has a comment or question.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So in terms of that context, I do support this because what I heard was an apology. Again, what I heard was if my words were taken out of context. So an apology that my words were taken out of context, not an apology for the comment itself. And again, we're here because, as other people have said, words matter. And no, if I have to qualify that, apologizing for words being taken out of context is not an apology for the impact of what was said. The impact of what is said is not dependent. It can't be differentiated based on, well, maybe somebody might take it as a joke and maybe somebody wouldn't. These things have to be thought out in advance. We talk about this all the time. The intent is not important, it's the impact. And the impact in the report is clear. So I agree that a proper apology is needed, that considering what I've heard around the room tonight, that we don't want to do more harm by having something badly worded. We want to do this right. It needs to come as a formal process because we as a board need to take responsibility for this. And I actually think this needs a B3 or an amendment to B2, that we all review the principles of equity, accessibility, prevention, and harassment in the workplace. Because more than once this evening, actually many, many times this evening, I heard the same phrase, something being taken out of context, something being taken out of context. And that is not the point of this report. So I think we would all benefit. We've done this before with other Integrity Commissioner reports, is that we have engaged the director in providing more comprehensive information and training for all of us. I think we all need an update.
So may I just ask, are you making an amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for this amendment? Trustee Rajwani seconds, and so is the amendment to provide training, further training to all trustees?
Further learning, yeah.
Further learning, further
all-
learning on accessibility and human rights?
Yes, accessibility and human rights.
To all trustees. Okay.
That's fine.
Rajwani.
Trustee Rajwani.
Thank you for your patience, everyone. We're just going to confirm for perhaps give us just 2 minutes. We're going to take 2 minutes and just figure out where this will go in the motion, whether it will be a part 3 to B, I think it will be a C looking at it. I'm imagining it will be a C, but I'd just like to confer with Ms. Joseph Dowers. So, are we in recess? No, we're not in recess. We're just taking a moment. No, I think. Back to the web. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. Sorry for the delay and for that little interlude. But just to circle back to remind everybody where we were, we had a mover and a seconder for Part C. This is an amendment, and I will read it, that the director provide further mandatory training to all trustees on accessibility and human rights. We're going to vote on that amendment now. We don't do friendly amendments, I don't think. Can we have it back up on the screen, please? Pardon? It can be whatever you want harassment in there? The word harassment? You didn't say that. Accessibility, harassment, and human rights. Okay, the mover is just clarifying her language. Trustee Arts, is it that you would like it to read to all trustees on accessibility, harassment, and human rights? Or can you clarify, please, what you're...
Clarify that the under B2, the items under B2 are the same for, that the director provide further mandatory training on those same items, equity, accessibility, and prevention of harassment in the workplace.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Trustee Vice Chair Shen, please go ahead.
I see something else added to A in yellow as well. Is that part of the amendment or not part of the amendment?
I'm just seeking clarification. Okay, Vice Chair Shen, I've been advised that we're dealing with Part C first, and then we'll go back to A and B.
Okay, thank you.
It was added? Okay, it was added, but we're dealing with Part C first, so we will get back to that. And I do recognize your point of order and question on that. So we're just amending the language on the amendment because apparently we didn't have it quite exactly right. Correct? Do we have, can I read it or do we need to get it up on the screen? Okay, give us a moment. We're getting it up on the screen. We really need interlude music. Interlude music, you know. Do, 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 do. Yeah, James, you could croon, right? There's probably a copyright infraction or something. We can't afford that. We are live, yes. It should be up in just a second. Okay, so we have we have C up on the screen. It reads that the director provide further mandatory training to all trustees on equity, accessibility, and prevention of harassment in the workplace. We have a mover and a seconder. All in favor of this amendment? Is this by show of hands or by?
Hi.
Just the amendment. Any opposed to Part C? Trustee Hastings is opposed. Okay, and we're stuck on it, but it has carried. Visually, it was obvious. We voted by hand. So are we going back to Part A? Okay, so we're just, if we could just get the amendment or the amended motion on the screen, and we're going to look at Part A. Trustee Dawson has added to the complainant on Part A. We'll be voting ad seriatim on all three of these items, like A, B, and C later, but first we're just, do I need to do that as a, well, this is just on the amendment, but before we open the vote on that, we will take questions or comments. Trustee Rajwani.
Through the chair, this is, I guess, a comment and another amendment, is since there's been lots of discussion that the oral apology has been completed, and I don't know if we've come to a consensus on that, I'm recommending that we change it to oral, where is it? On review, provide feedback on, sorry. Instead of or a written apology, to write and a written apology on A.
Change or to and?
Mm-hmm.
Where's or?
So if you see the respondent to the complainant at the next regular board meeting, or a written apology.
Change it to and. Okay. Can I have a seconder for that suggested change? I'll read the whole sentence. What's being suggested is that instead of the
Sorry, another part. Sorry, if I
Sure,
could just
go ahead.
add. Because it's saying at the next regular board meeting, but an apology has been verbally shared today. So I feel like that part is already in consensus, may be considered complete. And so that we just move forward with the written apology.
So may I pass the chair to the vice chair for today?
Yep.
So through the chair, I'm confused what just went on the screen, but what I'm wondering is whether you're suggesting instead of having an or, striking the first part of the sentence.
Yes, now that I'm reading it, I feel like it's just a written apology now. Because some of it's already been completed today. So instead of doing a public apology in the future, it's already done. So it would be a written apology.
So my comment on that is that earlier in the evening, Trustee King asked whether there might be whether there might be a barrier to the trustee providing a written apology, and there was an acknowledgement that might be challenging. So I'm concerned about removing that option of an oral apology because it seemed that a written one might be challenging. That's just a comment that I'll pass the chair back. Or I'll take the chair back.
No seconder for that amendment, so maybe it's.
Yeah, you know what, we shouldn't even be debating it because we haven't had a seconder yet for it, just now that I'm thinking about it. I'm sorry. Do we have a seconder for the, but I'm not sure what the change is that you're suggesting actually, because I'm not sure if it's the striking of it or if it's the adding and.
I think I've heard what you're saying, and reflecting back on the earlier part of the conversation, it was just a comment, and now that we've talked it through, it just keep it as is. I probably won't be voting in favor of that part, but we'll do it in seriatim.
So there's no amendment on the floor.
Okay, so there's no amendment on the floor, no change. Have we voted on Part A as amended? No. Okay, so we still have to vote on adding to the complainant. So that is currently, do we have a seconder for that? Did we get a seconder for that?
We need a seconder.
We need a seconder first to discuss it. Trustee King has seconded, so please go ahead, Trustee Dawson.
Thank you through the chair. I just wanted to clarify that public oral apology to the complainant would take place in the boardroom. It would not take place face-to-face with the complainant, who has indicated that they do not want a face-to-face interaction. Thank you.
So she's moving to place that.
King.
Seconding?
Okay.
Maybe discussion.
So is there any discussion on this change to Part A?
No discussion, let's vote.
I have, oh.
List.
We're just, so currently what's on the floor is adding to the complainant to Part A. I'd like to be added to the speakers list, and I think perhaps Trustee Vice Chair Shan as well, because I feel like I heard him come off mute. So I'm going to, Vice Chair Shan, did you have a comment on the?
Yeah, Madam
amendment
Chair,
today?
thank you. I hope it's in order to make an amendment to an amendment. I feel like, Madam Chair, we are discussing many things that lack context here. What we need is a public apology, not only for the person that was impacted, but anyone else who's impacted by the incident. So that there's a need for a public apology, and there's an apology needed to the complainant. That's the most important part. Like whether it's oral, when, like, is it at the board meeting, whether it happened or not, some of those things are being debated and there's no consensus on it. So I would like to move to say that the respondent trustee, Dennis Hastings, tender a public apology and an apology to the complainant. That's it. The form of it is something that the chair can work together with the trustee to figure out, because we are hearing different things. The complainant might have not wanted a direct apology at the time of the incident, but may now, may not, who knows? And Trustee Hastings has offered to do a apology directly to the person. Maybe that offer is made, and if the person still doesn't want to, then a written apology comes into picture. A public apology was made here at the board meeting. Whether that's sufficient or not is something could be discussed. So I do think that there's a lot of details that we are trying to add into this motion. I would just say my amendment would be that the respondent trustee, Dennis Hastings, tender a public apology and an apology to the complainant, period. And that, in terms of what format, we are talking about restorative justice here and remedial processes. And we are not hearing from the two people as much as we need to figure that out. And we are determining what is the best form of an apology and where it needs to be. The idea of one being public apology and the other part being directly to the complainant are the two things that we need to take into consideration. And whether that happens as a written or as an oral could be determined later. So if I can move that and have someone second that.
Okay, do we have a seconder for the suggestion? Trustee Patel has seconded. So this would read then that the respondent Trustee Dennis Hastings tender a public apology at the next regular board meeting of the board.
Not at the next regular meeting. Tender a public apology and
Tender,
an
okay, a public apology
and
and a written apology to
no,
the complainant?
and not a written, and an apology to the complainant.
Okay, we have a mover and a seconder for that. Discussion on that amendment, please. Trustee Dawson, followed by Trustee Laskin. Okay, Trustee Laskin, sorry, I saw you first.
Madam Chair, I believe that's contrary. If this fails, that could be put, but it's quite different than is here. So I don't see it as an amendment, and I'm wondering about a ruling about that.
Is it contrary? I think it's contrary.
But if it is, that's what I'm asking. If it's just this A be replaced with the respondent, this period.
Yeah, it's not different, is it? It's not that different, is it contrary? No,
Madam Chair, that's not, the oral wouldn't be there in that motion.
So currently we're on
So the respondent,
your amendment, which would replace Part A with a new part, with a slightly different Part A. I'm not sure it's so different. It's on the screen right now. Is this what you're suggesting?
except the word oral will not be there. It will say that trustee Dennis Hastings tender an apology in both cases. One in public and one to the complainant.
A public, it doesn't have to be oral is what you're suggesting, correct?
Yeah.
Dawson and then Hastings.
I just want to get it up on the screen and then we'll move, okay? We'll move along the speakers list. I have Trustee Dawson followed by Trustee Hastings. The respondent, Trustee Dennis Hastings, tender a public apology and an apology to the complainant. Do we have a seconder for this? So now we're on discussion of this item. Did I rule on Shelley's?
Did you rule, Madam Chair?
I don't believe it's contrary.
Madam Chair, point of personal privilege.
Just one moment. Trustee Hastings, I have you on the speakers list.
Point of personal privilege. May I?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm going to ask you, and through the chair, is this not a public meeting?
This is a public meeting.
This is a public meeting. Have I not yet apologized in a public meeting? It's a public meeting. So I've already apologized publicly. And you've got point C or part C making punitive to the rest of my colleagues what it is that you should be penalizing me for.
So respectfully, Trustee Hastings, I don't know that that training is punitive.
Yes,
training
it
is part of.
In this case, it is. Because they've learned their lessons. Obviously, I haven't. So now, again, on my personal privilege, I've apologized 6 ways come Sunday. And this is a...
Trustee Laskin, please let the respondent speak.
Thank you. And this is a public meeting. And I am apologizing publicly. And I've done that half a dozen times. So what are we here doing now is what I'm asking you.
So, Trustee Hastings, I understand your point. Trustees there's a motion on the floor. There's an amendment on the floor. Trustees will vote on it.
I still have a point of,
Point of privilege.
which
So
I'm pretty
what are
sure
what are
trumps
you
everything
asking?
else that's on the floor presently.
Can you clarify what you're asking me to decide?
You've asked, the board has asked, the trustees have asked, please apologize. I have done so, and I've done so publicly. Because as this is not an in-camera session, this is a public session. So what we're doing is, I'm not sure.
One moment. We're just going to pause for a moment while I confer with governance.
I just did.
Okay, so reflecting upon the point of privilege raised by Trustee Hastings, I would ask the mover and the seconder if they wish to withdraw the motion or a portion of the motion. Okay, so that's, she said no. The first, part A. So this would be Vice Chair Shan, is that what's being suggested? I think what's being suggested is it's the amendment, but it's also, right, it is now, it's A, but it's also the original A, depending on what happens with this. So Vice Chair Shan, based on what you've heard, do you wish to withdraw this?
Madam Chair, if the part A is being withdrawn from the other motion, then this gets withdrawn. But if it's not being withdrawn, this is an amendment to ensure that a public apology of what happened now, or maybe it might even happen right after this passes today, could be considered an apology instead of specifying a certain timeline. So mine is an amendment to section A of the motion. So if that's not being withdrawn, I could withdraw now, and then if that other part is not being withdrawn, I'll have to reintroduce it, right? So
He's making his withdrawal conditional. He's saying like table his amendment right now to continue. So his amendment can be tabled unless it goes back to the main motion. So is that doable?
Can we table and go back to the main motion? That's what he wants us to do.
Table his amendment.
Madam Chair, that's fine with me if you want to table this one and go back to the main motion. And then if that's not being withdrawn, then we can come back to this.
just reflecting on what's been said, my sense is that the first part of this phrase has been fulfilled. The oral apology has been fulfilled. The written apology has not been fulfilled. We haven't done there has not been a written apology. I don't believe we're allowed to, are we allowed to speak on points of order? Are you raising a point of order, or Ida can't speak on a point of privilege? Okay, we're going to take a recess because we're getting bogged down in the semantics of this. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're back. I'm going to give the floor to Trustee Dawson. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Can we project the motion? Or I guess, so I'm removing Part A. As per our numerous discussion, but can we see it?
So you're withdrawing Part A.
I will withdraw Part A because in Part B, it does capture, I think, the essence of what I'm hoping to accomplish, which was to receive input from a human rights authority on an apology. And so that is captured in B.
Okay. So are there any objections from trustees? Please go ahead, Trustee Sriskandarajah.
Do you understand, or can I? What do I do? Okay. No, I just have a question about that. So if A doesn't exist, how can B1 exist?
Can we project the motion?
Okay, so I think she's removed the end part of Part 1, B1. So review and provide feedback on an oral or written apology. She's removing referenced at Part A. And then Part 2 would still be there.
Okay, so it would just read, the director arranged for a human rights professional to meet with the respondent to review the principles of equity.
May I speak?
Trustee Dawson, can you clarify your intent?
Through the chair. B1 would read, review and provide feedback on an oral or written apology.
Okay, Part A would be struck. Part B would read.
And maybe it should
B1.
say oral or written apology to the complainant, since that is what was referenced in A. But it seems like A keeps getting bogged down with semantics, so I'm willing to withdraw it. But the intent of the motion is for there to be an apology, and for that apology to be meaningful, as it would have also been informed by input from a human rights authority, which is what it was missing from tonight's reference to an apology if harm was caused.
Okay, she's withdrawing. Okay. Does that answer your question, Trustee Sriskandarajah? Okay, thank you. So we'll open the vote on this then. No?
Yeah, no objections.
But aren't we now able to, okay, are there any, there are no objections to the withdrawal? Are there any objections to the withdrawal?
None?
Okay, I'm not hearing or seeing any.
We're still doing Ed Silvera?
Do I have to go back to Nathan's, or has Nathan withdrawn? Vice Chair Shan, can I just confirm that you've withdrawn your Part A?
Yeah, by withdrawing Part A from Trustee Dawson's thing automatically, yeah, I'm fine with that.
Thank you so much. Are there any objections to that? Hearing, seeing none. So I think at this point, we have the motion before us, and we will be voting ad seriatim on it, assuming there's no more questions about this. Trustee Sriskandarajah, go ahead.
Thank you. I just have a question, and I don't know who can answer it. Through you, Madam Chair, I'm just a little bit confused because it sounds like Trustee Hastings has told us he has apologized. Trustee Patel, Trustee Rajwani has said that an oral apology has taken place. So are we voting that apology is not appropriate and we want another apology? I'm just a little bit confused on if you're voting on an oral apology and Trustee Hastings has said he's already apologized, what would he say that's different next month?
So what I would suggest, Trustee Sukandaraja, is that we vote on Part B, that it be separated. B is the new A, right? Because there's no more A. B becomes A, and that we vote ad seriatim on B, so it would be B1, which has the apology in it, then B2, and trustees can do as they deem fit, I think is the best way to proceed. Does that work for you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I just want to share, from my understanding, it sounds like Trustee Hastings has felt he's apologized. And it sounds to me that there won't be much of a difference if he does it at the next public meeting. And so I'll have to accept his apology. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Pay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Trustee Hastings already made several apologies in public. So I don't think part of BA, now A1, doesn't make any sense. He made an apology, his sincere apology. How many times he had to make apology for? Why we need feedback for that from the staff? We don't have funding for that. Do you want to call him up again to make another apology so everybody can really hear? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Are there any other comments, or may we open the vote on this? Okay, so we're going to be voting ad seriatim. So it will be part A1, then A2, and then B. Or can I just clarify from governance staff, will we be using eScribe for this? Okay, can we vote by hand orally? So we're going to vote ad seriatim orally or by hand on part. We'll just wait for it to come up on the screen, just so everybody knows what we're voting for.
All microphones are on.
Okay, so part one is that the director arranged for the human rights manager to meet with the respondent to, one, this is what we're voting on, part one, review and provide feedback on an oral or written apology to the complainant. All those in favor, show of hands. So I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Trustee Earhart in favor.
Sean in favor.
That's 9. I counted 9. Opposed? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, and so that has failed. Now we're going to move on to part B, which is, sorry, not part B, part 2, A2, to review the principles of the equity, accessibility, and prevention of harassment in the workplace training provided to trustees. And we're going to do this again by show of hands. All in favor?
Trustee Earhart in favor.
Sean in favor.
Keep your hands up, please, everybody. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We had 14. We got 15. Anybody against? 1, 2, 3, 5. Okay. Okay. And that has carried. And now we're on part B, which is just about to go up on the screen. And this is that the director provide further mandatory training to trustees on equity, accessibility, and prevention of harassment in the workplace. All those in favor,
Shannon Phil.
Trustee Erhard in favor.
This is carried. Any opposed? Any opposed?
Here.
1, 2, 3. Okay, that has carried. Thank you, trustees. I would like to thank Mr. Maynard, the Integrity Commissioner, for his attention to this matter, and to trustees for their consideration on this. Next up, we are going back to item number 11, which is the Director's Leadership Report. So change of pace, and I will hand it over to you, Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair. Good evening, students, staff, community members, and the Board of Trustees. Student trustees, thank you again for showcasing your leadership. You always make me want to up my game with the number of things that you're involved with on a monthly basis. And welcome back, Student Trustee Zhao. It's good to see you. In October, staff are deeply engaged in innovative teaching and learning in and outside of our classrooms, and behind-the-scenes work that supports our business and operations departments. Before I begin my leadership report this evening, like the chair, I would like to recognize the situation in Israel and Gaza, which continues to weigh heavily on our hearts and minds. This conflict has had a devastating impact on many of the communities the TDSB serves, and we empathize with the grief, anguish, and fear being expressed by Jewish, Israeli, Palestinian, Muslim, and Christian people who have history and family in the region. There are many lived experiences and perspectives that people draw from in moments of intense crisis. The abundance of feedback and reactions from community members in recent weeks has made it clear that the official statements we have shared on the attack and war did not resonate with all members of the diverse communities we serve. To Israeli, Jewish, Muslim, Palestinian students, families, and staff, we're listening and are committed to creating more supportive situations where you feel seen, safe, and respected. We apologize and will persevere in serving all our communities individually and collectively to the best of our ability. As director, I'm also reflecting on the statements we shared last month, as well as all of the previous statements we have shared historically in other times of crisis, in order to develop a process for issuing more empathetic and student-centered communications during tragic events. Having said that, I know that the remarks I offer tonight might elicit even more feedback, and I'll just keep listening and make my commitment to learning. In all of the complexity that exists in the world today, it feels impossible to speak in absolutes. There are 4 statements I believe hold true. Firstly, Palestinian, Muslim, Christian, Israeli, and Jewish communities deserve to live safely. Secondly, the loss of any innocent life, particularly children, should disturb all of us. Thirdly, borrowing from the words of James Baldwin, may we always remember that our humanity is intertwined with each other. Naming the humanity of one group in the TDSB should never negate the humanity of another. In these difficult moments, I have found resolve and resilience from those, especially our children, who express a sincere and compassionate acknowledgement of one another's experiences. I know that's not always true, but despite what you're hearing and reading, it's happening more frequently than we know. I'm asking all of us to lean on compassion and a compelling drive to learn more about each other, to care, not only so we stay connected in schools and workplaces with the humanity of others, but with our own humanity. And finally, education is a powerful tool to change the world. We must never lose sight of our most important goal in the TDSB, and that is to support our students and their educational success. What we can do and what we must do is redouble our efforts to prevent anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian racism, xenophobia, and other forms of hatred. We must continue to grapple with the complexity of achieving the ambitious but necessary goals of true equity and inclusion in all of our schools each and every day. We encourage communities to report incidents that happen in and around our schools. We are responding and tracking them. Today, tomorrow, and every day thereafter, we must work against the forces of hatred gaining momentum while we focus on the ongoing pursuit of human rights and dignity for all. At this moment, honestly, I worry that not all educators have the knowledge, strategies, or resources to accurately educate about what's happening in Israel and Gaza in compassionate and truthful ways. But I know that as the TDSB community, we can create spaces in our schools that wrap children and youth tightly in empathy, respect, and care as they try to make sense of what is happening in the world, to their friends and to their families. It's our shared responsibility. We're not strangers to this mission because this, above all else, is the core work of education. Amidst all of the uncertainty that exists today, this much I know is true. It is challenging to know where to go from here in my report, but at the same time, you know me, I know where we must always return, and that's to centering the learning and well-being of our children. So I will briefly highlight two things: our updates on mathematics and wellness. The math department was excited to introduce a dynamic team of math facilitators, and you know we love to call things different things in TDSB. We're calling them math learning partners. This group of dedicated educators is working with grades 3, 6, and 9 classrooms within our 130 plus priority schools by collaborating with teachers and students to deepen their understanding of math through evidence-based instructional practices. MLPs also facilitate professional learning session primarily for educators in the same math priority schools, because we know about the importance of co-creating activities between educators for their students. We're really immensely grateful to our math learning partners for advancing mathematical excellence and ensuring that every student has the opportunity to build their confidence and to thrive in the world of mathematics. Moving on to wellness. We know there's a strong correlation between physical activity and improved mental health and achievement. That's why I'm happy to share that more than 30,000 students participated in autumn sports, embodying healthy, active living that we also call TDSB Wellness in Action. From cross-country races to flag and tackle football, student athletes took part in a wide range of inclusive athletic competitions throughout the TDSB. Teacher coaches, volunteers, and leaders in convener roles played an essential part in ensuring a safe, inclusive, and joyful experience for students. At a time when belonging and mental health are top of mind for all of us, sports and athletics often achieve both for youth. The Toronto District Elementary Schools Athletic Association and the Toronto District Secondary Schools Athletic Association are now looking forward to the upcoming full slate of winter season sports. All of these dedicated professionals have my heartfelt thanks for what they do for students. As I conclude my leadership report for this evening, I once again ask us all to remember that our humanity is intertwined with each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. I would just like to draw your attention to the fact that I missed item number 10, which is the reports from trustees appointed to external organizations, that part of it. But I do note that Trustee Dawson did provide a written report in our blue folders on the CNE, and I'm hoping that that is sufficient. I got a thumbs up. Okay, great. Thank you for that, Trustee Dawson. So at this point, we're going to move on to declarations of possible conflict of interest with the rest of the agenda. Trustee Laskin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Declaring a possible conflict of interest in a matter that's being discussed in private regarding negotiations, as my daughter is a member of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Laskin. Seeing and hearing no further conflicts, we will move on. At this point, it's matters to be decided without discussion. And my understanding is the only thing that is off consent agenda at this point is the 16.11, which is PO 31 Human Rights Policy Annual Review from the Governance and Policy Committee report. I'm just wondering, I think there may be an amendment to the consent agenda.
Yeah, I have a motion.
Trustee Williams, would you just like to let us know which one?
So I move that item 16.3.5 be removed from the consent agenda, supporting newcomer refugee students and families. And the possible notice of motion has been shared with all trustees. That'll come
business
from the
arising.
discussion.
Okay.
Need a seconder, I think?
So there's a business arising motion for this. So we need so we don't, do we need a second? We need two-thirds of the board. Okay, so we need a seconder, Trustee McLean. And then we need to vote in order to lift something from consent agenda on the day of. We need 2/3 majority of trustees to agree to that. So can we do this by show of hands of those willing to lift this item off the consent agenda?
Sean in favor.
Thank you, Trustee Shen. So that looks like 2/3. Are there any opposed? Any opposed? Okay, that's what I'm checking.
No.
Okay, so we're not seeing any opposed, so that has passed. So just for clarification, just to remind everybody, there's 2 items that are off consent. It's 16.11. Yes. Do you want to lift? He has to make a, which one do you want to lift? Okay, and there's been a request to have 16.4.5 lifted as well. Do I have a seconder for that? That's the Somali Center for Culture and Recreation. Trustee Suskandaraja, thank you. So we're also going to vote on that one. We need 2/3 majority to lift that. Can I see by show of hands? Okay, and any opposed? Seeing none, that has carried. So we now have 3 items off consent agenda. 16.45, I know I'm going in reverse order, but that's okay. 16.35 and 16.11. So can we vote on the matters to be decided without discussion? All those in favor? Oh, I need a mover and a seconder first. Trustee Pei, Trustee Hassan, all those in favor of consent agenda? Any opposed? Seeing none, that has carried. So we are going to move to 16.11. This is PO 31, Human Rights Policy Annual Review. I'm going to turn it over to the director to ask if there is someone from staff who will speak to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much through the chair. This report was based on some annual housekeeping that is done with the Human Rights Report. We're open to any questions that trustees may have.
Okay, we're going to start with Trustee King. Please go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. On this item, I had a chance to speak with system lead, Ms. Ibrahim, and clarify just the purpose and the parameters of this review, and really clarifying that it is a housekeeping review related to another policy. I just thought it was important to do so given the context of some of the conversations that we've been having in community and in the system and in the board currently and over the past year. Obviously, anyone who has followed the news, everyone in this room knows the attention on our human rights practices, about how they are understood and how they are upheld. I know that there are folks within our community who have seen the item on our Governance and Policy Committee agenda and seen the item here tonight and are wondering about just the shortened review process that proceeded without consultation or robust discussion. And I just think it's very important and helpful that the public understand that while this review was primarily about compliance, that absolutely there is an opportunity and expectation and a process for fulsome review of the human rights policy that comes at a later date and absolutely involves the involvement and consultation with stakeholders, including our advisory committees. As comprehensive as this policy is in the current form, I know that with the times that we're in, we've had challenges that have forced us to prompt new points for consideration and might warrant deeper discussion. So while this might not be the time for that fulsome discussion here based on the focus of the policy review, it is important that everyone here and watching knows that we acknowledge that need and know that it is imperative that we continually address the implementation of the current policy throughout our schools and that we're ensuring that we do have spaces that are safe and inclusive for all. So again, just thank you for that clarification, and I hope that's clear to the public tonight.
Okay, thank you, Trustee King. Are there any other speakers on this item? Trustee Arts, please go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I just wondered if staff could comment on what they expect the next review process for the policy will be, like a full review policy, and in the meantime, in ahead of that review, based on the conversations that Trustee King and I have had with some of our CAC representatives, how can CACs or their members or the public, can we have a clarification here of how they address what they might find in the policy as, things like terminology, updating terminology and approaches, highlighting issues in the policies and how that might then affect protocol outside of a policy review.
Through the chair, I would ask Human Rights System Lead Mahajabeen Ibrahim to respond, please.
Thank you. And through the chair, the human rights policy related questions and concerns is something that we welcome hearing on an ongoing basis and in real time, because that allows us to be mindful and responsive in our implementation of the policy, which is our high-level commitment to human rights. The various mechanisms through which this information is filtering is through unions, through committees, through directly emailing the Human Rights Office inbox, which is Human Rights Office at tdsb.on.ca, and any other way that people feel comfortable. So that means basically through their principal is appropriate as well, through their superintendent, directly to the HRO is fine as well, through their union, whichever forum they are comfortable bringing that. And we are committed to the ongoing collection of that information and responding both in real time and in when the full policy review takes place as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, Trustee Arts? Okay, Trustee Shiskandarajah, please go ahead.
I'll be quick. Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I just want to say a special thank you to Mahajabeen. This is incredibly difficult work, and it's constant and it's relentless. And she is always so positive, and I don't know how she does it, because it's all you ever hear is bad things. Nobody comes to the human rights to ask for fun stuff. So she always does it with a smile, and I don't know how she doesn't let it affect her. And she's always optimistic and wants to do good work. So I just want to say we really appreciate you, and we're lucky to have you. And please don't let yourself get poached by another organization.
Okay, that's so lovely. It's warm and fuzzy. Okay, so we're going to open the vote. No chance. We still have work to do, Trustee McLean. But on this item, we can open the vote. So didn't we have a mover and a seconder at the beginning? Okay, we're going to get a mover and a seconder for this item. Trustee Hassan, Trustee King. And all in favor to accept this. Thank you. And any opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Up next, we're moving to item number 16.3.5. This is supporting newcomer refugee students and families. And I understand we have business arising from this. Is that, we have to deal with it first? Okay, so can I have a mover and a seconder? Trustee McLean, Trustee Rajagulasingham. And I'll just ask the director if somebody could introduce this item.
Thank you, and through the chair, this particular report is a report that provides information around how the TDSB is working with newcomer and refugee families in order to provide support from summers and throughout the school year. And we welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And my understanding is that there's business arising from this report. Oh, I'm sorry, we have to vote to receive this report. Do I need a mover? I do need a mover. No, I have one. I'm not good after 10 o'clock. Okay, so all those in favor, show of hands.
Do we not have to move not the report, the reports now? If we vote on the report, how can how can the motion be moved?
It's business arising. Did you want to speak to the report? Okay, my apologies, Trustee Suskandaraja.
I just want to say a lot of appreciation for this report, and I think it was really enlightening. And as a person who is a refugee and who came to this country as a refugee and represents a community that's a refugee community, this was really heartfelt. The TDSB hasn't always got its commitment to our refugee community right. I know in the 90s, the Tamil community had a lot of issues with the school board. And I think those have been great learning experiences. So to see how far we've come as a board, I am very proud of the work. Just things like, the thought that has gone into things like, including busing for curriculum night, which might not be a major thought for a lot of people, but for a lot of communities, that's a major barrier. So I just want to tell staff, thank you for all of this work. And I know it's difficult work, and we continue to learn, and we're not always going to get it right. We see that in some of the schools, but we continue. And the sad reality is we will continue to get refugees. So not that we don't welcome them, but the state of the world is as such. So thank you again.
Thank you, Trustee Suskandaraja. Are there any further comments on the report? Okay, seeing none, we are going to vote on item number 16.3.5, and this is for receipt. We're going to do this by hand. So all in favor and any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this has carried. And now I understand there is business arising. The mover is Trustee Williams, and your seconder?
Seconder, Trustee
Hassan. Okay, thank you. So Trustee Williams, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you so much. So the written notice of motion was sent out to all trustees, and I beg your indulgence. I know it's been a long evening, but I think for the benefit of those who may be listening, I'll just say what the motion is. Whereas the Ministry of Education and the Toronto District School Board
must fulfill their moral and legal obligations to provide a safe, welcoming, and adequately resourced educational environment for all students, irrespective of their immigration status. And whereas on May 16, 2007, the board adopted policy P061, students without legal immigration status, so that all students who are qualified to be resident students of the board, including those who are without immigration status in Canada, shall be entitled to admission to school. And whereas on May 16, 2007, the board policy P061, students without legal immigration status, so all students shall be welcomed regardless of immigration status, and information about them or their families shall not be shared with immigration authorities. And whereas policy P061 and section 49.1 of the Education Act regarding the obligation to admit students without full immigration status was required to be communicated annually to all school administrators and school staff, and schools will implement admission procedures in accordance with these requirements. And whereas policy P061 also provides specific directives for staff orientation and training regarding the policy and implementation plan. And whereas newcomer students, including refugees and students without immigration status, shall require additional support from schools to address language proficiency needs and other needs, such as special education, social work, mental health, and translation interpreters. And whereas school boards may incur additional expenses and face cost pressures in providing appropriate programs, services that go beyond current planned programming and service levels. Therefore, be it resolved that the director shall establish a plan to ensure policy P061, students without legal immigration status, is being adhered to by all staff, and reaffirm the board's commitment to adequately support students without legal immigration status, newcomers, and refugees. And the additional part, and to report back on ways to track aggregate data. Also consult with stakeholders, including migrant organizations and undocumented residents, to determine barriers to accessing education for undocumented children, and present a report with recommendations to the Planning and Priorities Committee by January 31st, 2024. And the next part, that the chair write to the Minister of Education to request additional one-time funding or an adjustment to the 2023-2024 grant for student needs to ensure adequate support for refugees and students without immigration status. That information be provided to school boards, the Ontario Public School Boards Association, and the Council of Ontario Directors of Education on current settlement plans, including destination points for refugees. And further, that the chair write to both the Minister of Education and the federal government to request support to ensure that school boards are equipped with the necessary resources for successful integration of students without legal immigration status, newcomers, and refugees, including financial aid, language support, mental health services, and community resources. The next part, an update on federal immigration plans for the regularization of undocumented residents as set out in the Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship mandate letter of September 2021, which would ensure undocumented children would become permanent residents. And the next part, partnerships, so that school boards have the resources and support required, including financial, language, mental health, and community partnerships to successfully integrate children without legal immigration status, newcomers, and refugees into the education system. And that is the motion before you.
Okay, as the seconder, would you like to speak, Trustee Hassan?
Good evening, everyone. Just want to say thank you, Trustee Deborah Williams, for bringing this motion forward, and I'm more than happy to second this motion. As this motion hits very close to home, growing up in the city, born in Toronto, coming from parents that were refugees, and having older siblings that were also refugees, this motion really resonates with me, and I think that with the ongoing issues that we're facing with refugee and undocumented students, I think that this would definitely be the right path forward. And you know, when we look at policy at all three levels of government, it always affirms that every child has the right to education, and even through international law, right? Through the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, which also declares that all students have the right to education. But sometimes, you know, the reality on the ground tells us otherwise. So I'm glad that we're maintaining our commitment and also fulfilling our moral and legal obligations with this motion. And thank you again, Trustee Deborah Williams, for bringing this forward. Very happy to second it. And I really do hope that this motion does provide a safe, welcoming, and adequately resourced educational environment for all students, irrespective of their immigration status. Thank you once again.
Okay, and now we're going to the speakers list. I have Trustee Rajagulasingham first.
Thank you, through the chair. I want to thank Trustee Williams and Trustee Hassan for such a fantastic motion. As Trustee Sriskandaraj just said, my family and basically our whole community is a refugee-based one. And I think it's still common today to see, you know, depending which country you come from, the color of your skin, not all refugees are treated the same. And unfortunately, when you speak to a refugee, they're not empowered enough to share their lived experiences. They're just grateful to be here, that they accept kind of that model minority myth, and they don't complain, and they just want to be here. And I think it's so unfair for them to have that type of, to be treated that way. I shared this story before, but I think it's important and extremely relevant to this motion. A few weeks ago, I had a community member, a Tamil community member that had survived the Tamil genocide 15 years ago. They were a doctor in the no-fire zone. They were one of the surviving doctors that were working in a hospital that was bombed by the Sri Lankan state. So as you can imagine, someone like that surviving, providing testimony against the Sri Lankan government, and also being tortured by them. So if you were to Google his name, a lot of information about him would come up. But a person like this had such a hard time registering his children into our school system. And at this time, I want to thank Superintendent Monday Gala for advocating for this family. And I think this is why motions like this are extremely, extremely important, because we have fantastic policies in place. The don't ask, don't tell policy is fantastic. When it comes to the implementation and the accountability on our side, I think we need to review that. And I know part of this motion also asks for stakeholders. I also want to mention an organization called Justice for Children and Youth that work to support precarious children with precarious immigration status. And I hope staff will consider working with them because they have identified different spots across Toronto where they believe students with precarious immigration status are. I do have a suggestion to staff that in Part A, where it says establish a plan, I hope the plan includes a mechanism for accountability. It's great that we have this plan, but how are we tracking that every principal is following through with this process? Because I think that's where the trouble is. I think a refresher is really helpful, but how are we tracking accountability? Also, when it comes to, as this work unfolds, I know we've reached out a lot to our partners at the ministry, and sometimes we don't hear back from them. But I hope that as this work unfolds, I hope we continue to share the work and what we've been learning with the province, and especially with our with those at the federal level, because I think we have a closer hand at our, we have a better relationship with our students and their stories, and perhaps our learning could benefit them at that level as well. So thank you again to trustees. I think it's extremely powerful to see folks talk about this who may not have a lived experience as a refugee. That allyship is powerful, and I'm really thinking about 30 years ago, those Tamil students that were in our buildings and faced that culture shock, that were bullied, that were, that were expelled and suspended, the policing of Tamil boys in our schools. And I think we've come a long way as a school board, and I'm excited to see how this will unfold. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Rajakulasingam. Up next, we have Trustee Dawson, followed by Trustee DeVitis. That's the speakers list so far.
Thank you through the chair. I do want to thank the movers of this motion. I think it's an excellent motion. I have experienced challenges in my ward with refugee students being able to be registered. And one of the excellent organizations in my ward that we've been working with is FCJ Refugee Center. So I also just wanted to throw their names out there as well as a potential agency to work with. I did want to make mention of two things for staff to consider potentially in the recommendations that come back should this pass. I think there's a real need for extremely simple and visual only resources for families to understand the process. We do have some resources available, but they're wordy and they're in English. So it would be helpful if, there could be some sort of universal design around the resources available to educate families. And yeah, I'll just leave it there. Thank you very much.
Okay, up next, Trustee DeVitis.
I want to start by thanking Trustee Williams for the work that she put into this. I know that I had the opportunity to talk to her a number of times on this issue. I had the opportunity to talk to Trustee Dawson and a number of others as well on this issue. I had an opportunity to meet with staff, both senior staff of the executive team, a number of principals on this issue. And I do feel that as the school board, we do need to revise our processes and think through some of the suggestions, such as the suggestion by Trustee Dawson just now in terms of what we communicate and how we communicate it. 500,000 people came to Ontario just recently in the last year. And the way some of those folks are getting into Canada is different than when we first established the policy some 15 plus years ago. And there are there's just a very large number of people are falling through the cracks. So school A had two families, same circumstance, 2 weeks apart. School A had talked to the principal was able to get the students registered. School B, different principal, different administrative staff as well, I guess. And the child was not able to get into the school system, the older child, even though the younger child was. And I'm not sure that that child is in school right now. And the inconsistency in that follows from the instructions that we're giving our staff, because I sat down with the staff and they were following direction from us. So I think we need to go back and revise how it is that we communicate internally to communicate with our administrators in the schools, what it is that we're supposed to be following, and what our objective is. And our objective should be to give every child an opportunity for an education. It is our moral duty to do that. And I'm more than happy to support this and to ensure, as much as we're able to, that every child has that promise fulfilled. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And up next, I have Vice Chair Shan, followed by Trustee Suskandaraja.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Trustee Williams and Trustee Hassan for bringing this motion forward. In the mid-90s, I came to Canada at the age of 16 as a refugee youth, and things were pretty difficult. I went to Easter Collegiate, and there were a lot of racial profiling, stereotypes, marginalization that me and my peers felt, and often any antisocial activities of the youth were termed as issues that we were bringing from quote unquote back home, wherever we were from. And to be frank, though, I know we can tell ourselves that we have made progress, but there still continues to be the case for many, many newcomers. After the wave of Tamil youth, Somali youth went through this, Afghan youth went through this, Syrian youth went through this, and the cycles of these forms of discrimination and profiling and marginalization continues to happen, and so I think this motion is critical, particularly beyond the refugee population, those who are undocumented. There was an organization that was fairly active. No one is illegal. That led to a lot of policy changes within the City of Toronto and TDSB, and we're beginning to feel like we're losing some of those progress. And in the current context of economic hardships, refugee populations, newcomer populations are unfairly being blamed. In fact, the economic growth has always been sustained by newcomers and refugees, and on the contrary, the public discourse still continues to scapegoat refugee, newcomer, immigrant population, particularly racialized refugee immigrant population. So I would say this is a great motion. We need to keep working on it, but we also need to change the frame in which we talk about refugees within our school system. It's not a charity function, it's more of a social justice function. Today, many countries are producing refugees as a result of failed foreign policies of countries like Canada. And so it's important to contextualize what's happening as a form of transformative justice as opposed to a charity function. So that means celebrating the resilience of our communities that come, celebrating the strength and the courage that they have and they bring to our schools, and finding ways to meaningfully integrate those into our pedagogies, into our work, because that's the only way we can deal with the marginalization that happens. So in addition to these activities, I think it's important to also find organizations that operate from those frameworks, not just necessarily a charitable, service-oriented organization, but also organization that work to empower racialized communities, newcomer population, and tell the stories in a way that is empowering and transformative as opposed to charitable models. So I'm very happy to support this motion. I know it's quite late today, but there are hopefully more motions that emerge from this in a more substantial way in the coming days, coming back from these reports that are being requested in the letters, as we continue to struggle with how federal policies have impacted how these populations are being supported as well. Thank you.
Trustee Sriskandarajah, you're next.
Thank you. I just want to thank the movers, Trustee, for their incredible work on this important, timely motion. I've been here, I think, 5 years, and the first 4 years, I rarely got these sorts of requests. And in the last year, I have just, I think maybe the first 4 years I might have got one. And in the last 4 years, I've just seen that number just increase at an astonishing rate. And as you know, the inner suburbs often is the home to newcomers, in particular refugees. And so we might get a higher number of these requests. There are often, I worry about those who don't even make the request because they're just worried about their status. And how, alerting the authorities. So, thank you for this important work. I think a lot of my colleagues made excellent points. I had a similar issue, actually, with the case that Yalini, or Trustee Rogers-Clissingham mentioned, because that doctor, their child is in both our wards, or one child is in two of their children, you know what I mean? And the same thing happened. One school accepted them, the other school didn't. And also having refugees in particular who've had literally, in this case, bombs dropped on them or near them, or those that they worked with, to have to relive and try to explain to a school administrator It's just such an odd power dynamic, and that's not our responsibility, and that's not our duty. Our duty is to provide education. And so, I also want to say, though, I think there's great emphasis on refugees, but I also think we have to think of the newcomers who don't come through that stream. Oftentimes, they also face a lot of inequities. And I think our schools, at least from my experience, oftentimes have a better job of dealing refugees because they understand that, and oftentimes they don't understand immigrants, economic immigrants who might sound in theory as well off, but when they come here, we know that's not their realities. And so oftentimes I have cases where parents are just in between status, right? And so they have to they're on a working visa, but then they're sent to our international student office to pay international fees, but they're in the process of getting that sorted out, and they can't afford those things. So I think there's more complexity, and I think that's where a lot of this is happening, where principals might not, or school staff might not really be understanding sort of the complexities that go into this. And I think we should always, at the front of our mind should always be to educate every child. And so I think this motion is really great for that. I just have two questions. I would like to ask the director if the January 31st deadline is doable, just because I know there's a lot of things happening. And then my second question is, what does track aggregate data mean?
Thank you very much. Through the chair, Associate Director Salmon, would you please respond?
Thank you, and through the chair. In going through this particular motion, part of what the request is involves us consulting with community agencies and organizations that support refugees and newcomers, and also speaking with families around their lived experiences and reporting back to the board. We anticipate and suspect that may take a little bit of time, and so what we're anticipating is maybe a little bit later date with respect to the reporting back, but we are eager to get started on that particular work, because so much of what you've outlined at number one around communication to principals and making sure that that communication is clear and outlined directly to administrators who are working with families on a regular basis. And number two, ensuring that we are providing the necessary support and clarification around things with respect to visa students and students that are coming in as refugees, and ensuring that the processes are clear for both staff, students, and families within our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I don't know what that means for the movers. Like, do we change the date, or are we flexible on the date? But I do appreciate that comment because, as was mentioned, this requires consultation, and serious and meaningful consultation. And I know our staff can do it. I just want it to be intentional and not rushed, just to say we've done it. So if they need time, I leave it up to the movers, but I appreciate that. And my second question is also, I'm not too clear on what track aggregate data. It could just be me that doesn't understand what that means in this context, but if I could get clarification around that, I would appreciate it.
So thank you. And through the chair, tracking aggregate data is a little bit of reference to the notion of providing data that will not in any way, that's more at a macro level and a high level, rather than data that is at the micro level, such that we're not identifying any individuals or communities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I know what it means. I meant in this context. So are we asking to track all the statuses of our students? I understood it as we were just making sure that this policy is understood by our staff. Are we now going to track the statuses of our student? And is that counterproductive to what we want to do, which is not ask them their status? I'm just a little confused.
Is it okay if I speak to that?
So I'm going to just ask the movers to speak to their intention with this first, and then if staff wishes to add anything else, they can.
So the ask in that section there is a report back on ways to track the aggregate data. So reporting back on, you know, what data and the ways we could like get a sense of like what's happening. There's no intention, and it's clear, like even in the whereas, that the identities of, you know, these undocumented students and families is no way relayed to immigration authorities. So that's clear in our policy. Maybe Trustee Hassan would like to speak to this a little bit as well. If you want, you don't need to. But it was just to get a sense of, you know, what's happening here. And it's up to the director to report back on how that can be done in a way that protects confidentiality, in a way that doesn't expose the board to any risk, and those kind of considerations.
It's okay. Trustee Hassan, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been getting, you know, quite a few emails and phone calls related to this matter. So that's why this really, you know, resonated with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on, right? Any way I can extend it, or?
You have the opposite problem with me.
Okay. So, yeah, this has been an ongoing issue, and I'm happy that once again that Trustee Williams brought it forward. More than happy to second it. And the part about the data, obviously there will be privacy concerns, but I'm sure there's ways around it, right? There needs to be a way that we can track what's happening and how we can, you know, mitigate any further risks or come up with new plans and strategies going forward and how we deal with our students or undocumented students. And that's why we're sort of asking staff to present that to us. And, you know, ultimately, I think there needs to be accountability and transparency when it comes to these type of processes, especially when we're trying to come up with solutions collectively for the board system-wide. So once again, thank you, Trustee Williams. Happy to second this and hope that all trustees here can support this tonight.
Okay, does that assuage your concern, Trustee Siskandraja?
Just very quickly, yes, I think we just got to be very creative on, we don't want to ask people their status and then them feeling they can't share their status. So just being mindful of how this might be perceived.
Can I pass, can I pass the chair to you?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, no, I can't pass the chair. It's your motion. Trustee Rajakulasingam, do you mind if I pass the chair to you? Look to the right. So I'm happy to see this this motion as well. In my experience, you know, I have a really diverse ward. I have an elementary school with settlement workers inside the school. Every day there's new kids coming. And then I have schools that have in recent years started getting refugees or newcomers and who aren't familiar necessarily with agencies and all the different supports that students might need because they don't deal with it on a regular basis. And the reality is we want all of our administrators and staff to have familiarity with it because we want them to have diverse experiences so that they can move from one school, one area of the city to another, but also so that they can truly serve all students in their schools. So I think this is a really great motion and I'm happy to support because I think this will make our system as a whole stronger in supporting every student that walks through the doors. And that is the goal of education. Thank you. So I'll take back the chair if that's okay. And I'm not seeing any further, anyone further on the list, so we can open the vote on this. And will we be voting on e-scribe on this motion? Oh, and are we leaving, can I just ask the movers, are we leaving the date as January 31st or what?
I think we can leave it and then the director can report back, you know, if more time is needed, if that's reasonable. Yeah.
Is that reasonable to the director?
Thank you very much. Through the chair, that is reasonable.
Okay, thank you. So we'll open the vote.
Chan in favor.
Trustee Earhart in favor. Thank you.
Trustee Pay in favor.
Shernis Lynn is in favor. Any opposed?
I'm in favor.
Hearing none, that has carried. Okay, we are moving on to item number 16.5. This is the Somali Center for Culture and Recreation. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this? Trustee Hassan, Trustee Dawson, and I'm going to turn it over to the director first. No, I'm going to turn it over because this was a motion to Trustee Hassan. Thank you.
For the chair. So I wanted to lift this item tonight because this motion means a lot to me. I want to thank all trustees for supporting at the last Planning Priorities Committee meeting. Special thank you to Trustee Dawson for seconding this motion. At the last PPC meeting, there were many kind words that were shared. Askin, Dawson, Trustee Shan, Trustee Matthias, everyone shared kind words, and the community is very thankful for that. You know, the communities had their downfalls over the years, but the days ahead are much brighter, and this motion means a lot. I remember last year when my Councillor Natiana brought this motion forward at the City of Toronto, and since then, we've moved mountains as a community. We've gotten endorsements from all three levels of government, MPPs and MPs. Thank you for the mic, appreciate it. And we've come a long way. And now to have the largest school board in Canada to endorse it, it means a lot. And it's going to definitely help us with our advocacy going forward. I also want to thank our Director of Education, Colleen Russell-Rawlins, who supported this from the moment I brought it forward to her. Thank you very much. Also, the rest of staff as well, including Executive Superintendent Uton Robinson. They were the first ones I spoke with before bringing this forward as a motion. I also want to talk about how important it is when it comes to community and infrastructure building to have partnerships and endorsements, as you guys can imagine. This endorsement alone will open many doors, and it's not going to be an easy battle to build this community center, as you guys can imagine how expensive it would be. But we're willing to take on the task. I come from a very resilient community, the Somali community, and being here today as the first Somali trustee means a lot to my community, and the fact that I'm bringing this forward, I'm sure they're very grateful for as well. And you know, just talking about partnerships, TDSB has been working with the Somali community for quite a while now. In the Islamophobia motion, I talked about the Somali task force that was set up, and I've seen how that's moved mountains for the Somali youth, and how we've had some of the lowest grades to now we're on par with the average grades in the school system. So when you take those concentrated approaches, it really does show positive impact. And I think this community center will do the same at a larger scale level, right? And I've had questions about, is this just for Somalis? No, it's not. It's for everyone. But is this a place where people can go and appreciate Somali, the beauty of Somali culture, right? And the beauty of Somali art, and to see our rich history, which is a very important aspect when we talk about inclusion in the City of Toronto. So once again, I want to thank you, Trustee Dawson, for seconding, and all trustees for supporting. And I really just wanted to pull this item to say thank you to staff and trustees. Thank you very much.
Okay, and
Might have to use this going forward.
Okay, so I'm looking to see, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments on the list. And we will open the vote on this item. And you get your own stand. Perfect.
Sean in favor.
Okay, It doesn't seem to be coming up for everybody, so maybe can we do show of hands? Is that okay? So we'll do a show of hands. All in favor?
Trustee Erhard in favor.
Trustee Pay in favor.
Thank you to those online letting us know. Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, that has carried unanimously. There it is, 20-0. Yay. And next, we have adjournment of the public portion of this meeting, don't we? What do I have to? No, I have to go into recess? Why?
You have to go in the private.
Oh, okay, sorry. My apologies. We're going to, I asked for a mover to move into private, a mover and a seconder. I see trustee Laskin's hand, trustee Rajagulasingham. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, and student trustees, thank you very much for your attendance this evening. At this point, you can go home. You're free. You're free. You're free. Everybody's envious. And I'm gonna